Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in a series authored by Badasadi Mani. My name is Muhammad Fasih Peterson, and joining me once again, the author Badasadi. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the show once again.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Muhammad Fasih and the listeners out there.
Badasadi, shukran so much for joining us, and tonight we will be delving into a topic that I think is crucial for a Muslim in order for him or her to be content in this world, in this realm, that we need to come to grips with. We've been speaking in the last couple of weeks about good and bad and how good and bad comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously, we're not just referring to evil and goodness, but also the good and bad things that happen to people in their lives, the good and bad experiences. And so tonight we'll be talking about the effects on the human being in light of those experiences and how we need to respond to those circumstances, inshallah. And also, uh, in exploring this, I believe that we'll also be looking at the framework and thinking and mentality that we need to adopt in order to cope with the challenges that come our way, inshallah.
Yes, Muhammad Fasih, I think last week we said that um, the heading of the next few sessions would be that difficulties, calamities, tests that we all go through are in fact, great blessings. Now, it is difficult for us when we go through the pain and the trauma to actually recognize these things as difficulties. And what we are trying to do is to lay the foundation of how we should approach it. So I just want to summarize very briefly what we spoke about last week. There are several hadith and Quranic ayah that speaks about this type of issue. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that Allah has created us to test who of us are best in behavior, in conduct, or as it said, in deed. Now, another ayah that we also mentioned last week was that Allah says in the Holy Quran that do people think that they will be left alone because they say we believe and will not be tested? It's confirmed in another ayah that we will be tested. Now, we mentioned it last week, and I think it's worthwhile repeating that Allah does not benefit from our difficulties and our hardships and sufferings. Allah is far above any influence from creation. So if it does not benefit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then if Allah puts us through these tests and these difficulties, then we must actually search for what is the lesson that we must derive out of that test that we are experiencing now. What is the benefit that we are not seeing? We are so consumed by the difficulty that we forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually placed a great blessing in that difficulty, whatever it might be. Now, the consoling part about this is that, yes, Allah guarantees that we will all be tested, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says two other things as well, that no one will be tested beyond their capacity. No one will be tested beyond what they can cope with and what they can bear. Allah says that because Allah created us. Allah knows exactly what we are able to cope with, what is our extreme limit, and what would be beyond that. And every test that we are given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means, no matter how difficult it is, it means that we should take comfort in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, that we won't be tested beyond our capacity. And then, of course, the famous one that everyone knows is that inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra. That verily after difficulty comes ease. Allah promises. So we're not going to be in a permanent state of just hardship and test. There will be relief. As long as we remember that when things are okay, then test will follow. The one follows the other. Difficulties is followed by relief and ease, and in the same way, ease and comfort will be followed by test. So no situation will be permanent one way or the other. As an introduction or a summary of last week's session, Muhammad Fasir.
Now, but certainly the other thing that I wanted to touch on is related to what we've just spoken about, and there is this idea that we have that we should, when we talk about happiness, we think of it as a state wherein everything is to our liking, everything is satisfactory, and we have no challenges. But what Prasad has outlined is that life is about challenges. It is about difficulties. It is about things that throw you off track. One then has to respond to those, we would call them challenges. So then that would be, the question there would be, if we are saying that life isn't, in a sense, always a bed of roses and there will be challenges along the way, those challenges coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are they designed to do in the human being? What response are these challenges intending to elicit from a Muslim?
Muhammad Fasih, the answer to that question comes from a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and I'm going to quote, open quote, whoever Allah wants good for, He puts them to test, and through difficulties, like a diamond or some metal that has to be burnt, and then that which is bad from it is removed, so that you have only that which is the pure diamond or the pure gold. That is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says. Now from that, we are pointed to the fact and reminded that we will all be tested, but the purpose is for purification. Remove the bad from whatever is within ourselves. So one of the big reasons of why we are put through this is the time that we spend on the dunya. We are so involved with material things, and we're under the control of our nafs and shaitan that our hearts get stained. And the purpose of these tests, one of the big purposes, is to purify our hearts so that we can develop iman and taqwa. The thing when we all make dua, oh ya Allah, give us iman and taqwa, strengthen our iman and taqwa. We say it parrot fashion. And we don't make the link that in order to get that which you are asking for, Allah is giving you the tools. He's giving you the test. Through that test, you are actually supposed to develop iman and taqwa. Now, we can get into some of the methods of what is advised to us as we move along, Muhammad Fasir.
The voice of Badasad Imani. This is the program Tawhid in the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid. Tonight we're speaking about tests. When tests come our way, when things don't necessarily go the way that we want them to, unpacking what that means, and what Badasad has also explained is that there is a statement in the Quran which is emphatic. It mentioned twice that after difficulty comes ease. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not test us except that Allah will bring relief. and also that believers are tested in as far as their capacity. And I believe we spoke about this last week as well. When we come back, inshallah, we'll continue. Of course, this is the program Tawheed and the Creation. Back after this. I mean, where do we go from here?
So how do we develop iman and taqwa? That would be, or how do we use the situation so that we actually attain what it's been designed for? The purpose, as we said, was purifying our hearts, removing all those bad things that's contained in our hearts, in order to replace it with iman and taqwa. Now, how do we go about doing that? Because it's a cherished thing. Iman and taqwa is something that is we all strive for as believers. But how do we actually achieve it? Using difficulties.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawheed and the Creation, exploring the book, The Essentials of Tawheed. Tonight we are speaking about challenges, difficulties that is placed in the path of a believer, and the challenges and those difficulties are designed, as we've mentioned, to refine the belief of a human being, to refine the iman of an individual, and bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Bidasani, the big question is then, how do you use trials and tribulations to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do you respond? What would be the best way to respond? Because obviously, when something bad happens to a human being, knee-jerk reaction is to act out, is to become sorrowful, to become depressed, to become angry sometimes with the Almighty, subhanAllah, which we people do sometimes. There are many responses to challenges and difficulties. But what exactly would be the correct response? And what would be the response that would help us to put us on that path to taqwa?
Muhammad Fasih, when we are going through all of these difficulties and tests, and when we say tests, of course, they range from small tests to very, very difficult tests. It's accompanied by a lot of pain and suffering and trauma. And it's not easy for us as human beings, while we are going through that pain and suffering, to actually think that is beneficial for us. But as we grope for solutions, then what it is supposed to do is to bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are looking for solutions to our problems. And ultimately, it should lead to us placing our utter and complete reliance and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone for the solution to whatever that test or difficulty is. And that, if you have total and utter trust and reliance only on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's an extremely powerful way of strengthening your iman and taqwa. And when you have iman and taqwa, true iman and taqwa, then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, it is accompanied, the development of iman and taqwa is developed where the believer is given wisdom. He's given wisdom. Wisdom is not something that comes from reading a lot or sitting in lectures. Wisdom comes purely as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with pure iman and taqwa, Allah gives you that wisdom, and on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you spiritual insight, things that other people would not normally be able to see. We're not talking about miracles. We're just talking about Allah gives you an insight where you can look at something and you can see it with wisdom and spiritual insight, and easily able to identify the good and bad um, in things that you see around you and what's happening in your life. So people like this, who have iman and taqwa, they submit themselves completely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most importantly, they are satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put out for them, what Allah has predetermined as your life is going to made up of this test, and that test, and the slave stands back. He has now iman and taqwa. He has the proper attitude towards those difficulties. And he says, if Allah has decreed this for me, then I am satisfied. And that, I think, is one of the most tremendous signs of progress that a Muslim can make. If you develop true iman and taqwa, and the path might not look very obvious, that it comes through while you are going through all these horrible, terrible experiences under normal circumstances, but yet that is the route to actually develop iman and taqwa, Muhammad Fasih.
Now, but certainly the goal, obviously, of developing iman and taqwa is the prize here.
Yes.
However, the journey is not easy. It's very difficult. One will encounter different tests, different challenges, on different levels. Um, so, how does one remind oneself? Because we can so easily forget, and mankind is of the nature that he forgets. Uh, we can so easily forget that it is a test, especially when confronted with the fact that it's something, confronted with a situation where it involves your emotions, where you become involved in a way that touches you very deeply. So how do we remind ourselves that it is at the end of the day just a test, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us through it? How do we constantly, how do we develop that mindset so as not to become absorbed by the challenge, and devoured in a sense by the difficulty?
Muhammad Fasih, it obviously depends on the state of the heart of an individual. A person who has some level of iman and taqwa and is a pious person, or a person trying to be pious, would deal with the difficulty very differently to a person who is a willful sinner, for example. They just do whatever they want. They Muslim, but they're committing sins as if there's no tomorrow and there's going to be no year after. Now, it depends how you are with respect to your deen and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sirrul Aziz says in one of his books, Futuhul Ghaib, Revelations of the Unseen, in one of the first two discourses, he says, when people are confronted with hardships, the first thing they do, and it's amazing how this applies, if we're honest with ourselves, it applies exactly to all of us. I include myself, without realizing. He says, when you're confronted with a difficulty or a hardship or a problem, big or small, the first thing you do, you run around and you try and find your own solutions. You do whatever you can. And when you, at the point where you've exhausted all possibilities of solving it yourself, then you run to family and friends. If it is something that requires intervention, you go to somebody with influence or power or money or whatever. Now you've gone beyond yourself. You know you can't sort it out, depending on what the problem is. then you turn to other people around you that you think will be able to assist you with that problem. It's only when they are not able to solve your problem, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani Qaddasallahu Sirrin Aziz says, only then do you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the big mistake we are making. Because if you solve it yourself, then you don't turn to Allah. You've got your solution. So it's so dangerous to try and do things ourselves without recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's going to supply the answer, because Allah is the one who created the difficulty for you, the test for you. Allah spoke about it. I'm going to test you, then Allah tests you. Now you try and deal with it on your own without recognizing that Allah is the creator of the test, and therefore the only one who can actually supply the solution to that test. We should actually turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on every single thing, the most basic thing. Even when you just get up in the morning, you might feel perfectly healthy. Recognize that even a simple act of getting up in the morning, getting out of bed, you're not going to do it with your own ability and strength. Recognize that immediately you bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into the equation, that Allah is the one that you turn to under all circumstances, whether there is a test or not a test. Because what is going to happen, Muhammad Fasih, is if we don't do that and we don't find the solutions, then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do is keep you in that state of difficulty for long, till you remove all possibility of and reliance on yourself or on others, till it's completely removed, and you cry and you plead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for relief and for solutions. Then your iman and taqwa is so strong, and you've removed all the other influences and options from the equation. Then you actually are as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you should be, and the test has then, but you are kept in that position. That is what you must remember.
The voice of Bilisani Mani. This is the program Tawhid in the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid. And tonight we are speaking about tests and challenges when a human being is afflicted with difficulty, and understanding the response that needs to be effected. When we come back after the break, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. But Sunny, where do we go to from here?
I was going to go on to the person who behaves in an unacceptable way. Can we just look at that? What is wrong with that, and why is it that people behave in that way, and what is the purpose for the person in that? What is the lesson he should extract? And the idea is that you should recognize that there's things that you are doing in your life that's unacceptable, that Allah is dissatisfied with, and that test is supposed to be a trigger for you to correct that. The second response of where people, in fact, are they okay? The people who feel the hurt and pain, but they say they're acceptable, is that the best response? And then, of course, it's not. The best response is actually to show happiness. But how can you show happiness while you're bleeding and the rent is not paid and the sheriff is knocking on the door to come and attach your goods or whatever?
But certainly in terms of the first point that Sani made with regard to the people who are not who are not were not responding. Is Sani referring to the
inappropriate? Yeah, the inappropriate.
The
yeah, they say, wow, how can Allah test me like this? This is unfair. They make all sorts of statements to express their dissatisfaction. Now, what are they supposed to to learn out of that, because we fall in that trap. Even sometimes we don't say it with our mouth, but mentally or in our heart, we feel, oh, this is now getting too much. I can't cope with this, Allah. And you express dissatisfaction. So the first one is correcting incorrect behavior. Second one is purification of the heart. Third one is elevation. Allah raises your station.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid. And tonight we are speaking about tests and challenges, and how we as human beings need to engage with these challenges and tests so that we can best serve our Creator, and that we can best be able to shed those bad qualities that we adopt, and those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with, and that we can purify ourselves, inshallah. I mean, now, but Sadi, obviously, there are different responses to tests and challenges, as Sadi has laid out. So let's look firstly at the person whose response to a trial or challenge is one that is unacceptable, one where the person is almost stands in opposition to his Creator for the difficulty that has been waged upon him or her. What is the role of the challenge in that sense? How should that person be engaging with it? And what are the pitfalls and the harms of someone who responds to a test in such a manner?
Muhammad Fasih, a person who expresses unhappiness, even if you express unhappiness about the test, it's already bad. But people go beyond that. They even say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unfair. So, and sometimes they get cross. Sometimes they deal with it in such an unacceptable manner that they actually can become kufr. They cross the line completely. They're upset with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the things that they actually are going through. Now, a person who's at that level, who behaves in that way, not only don't they have iman and taqwa, but they are at such a low level of belief. And if we go through tests, we must understand the test is designed to do one of three things. The first thing is that you must correct something that is unacceptable or bad in your behavior. You must examine your life. What are you doing? Why is Allah putting me through this test? This is one of the possibilities. Allah's putting you through the test because there's something that you must reflect on in your life, and you must make a plan to correct that. Stop that and do the right thing. The second thing, or the second response is, the person doesn't express the anger and the dissatisfaction. Maybe says, I'm accepting it, but they're not necessarily satisfied. They say, I accept that is what Allah has put out, but they a little bit unhappy, but they're not expressing anger and total dissatisfaction. Now, a person like that is obviously at a higher level of iman than the first person. That person is supposed to use that. Allah has created that test as a means of assisting that particular person to purify themselves from bad qualities that they've adopted, to purify the heart. So the first one is to correct incorrect, unacceptable behavior and conduct. The second one is it's designed to assist the slave on the process of purification of the heart. And that can take different forms, like just why we're doing things with the wrong intention. We're doing good deeds, but the nafs is involved, or shaitan is whispering in your ear. Yes, you're doing good things, whether it's Allah or charity or whatever. Now then, that would be the time when you are tested to examine the things that you are doing that's right. Can you not do it better with the right intention? And of course, the third thing, Muhammad Fasih, is the category of people when bad things happen to them, they actually express joy. They're happy. A robber comes around the corner, or a gangster stabs them and they're bleeding. While they're bleeding, they're expressing joy. Can you imagine that? How far we are from that category of person. A person like that, Muhammad Fasih, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designs that situation for a person who's at that level to actually raise his daraja.
But certainly, then can I ask what motivates such a person? Because we're speaking about something that is difficult. Someone gets stabbed or they get harmed a certain way and they express joy. So, what drives a person on that level? How does he look at his creator that would give him a sense of contentment and a sense of happiness with this test, as opposed to the other categories of people?
Muhammad Fasih, it's a state that we all should strive for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as Muslims, we are compelled to do things with excellence. Now, these people have reached the level of ihsan, the level of excellence in behavior. Their attitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is faultless. They have the right attitude towards Allah at all times, under all conditions. Whether they're going through suffering or whether they're going through ease and comfort, they always recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is in control of every situation throughout their lives. Now, we, of course, are very, very far from that. But these are special people. We must first try and correct the first two categories, because both categories, the first one and two, we all fall prey to that. We all fall prey. We don't maybe say it in so many words, but we feel it or we think it. Muhammad Fasih.
The voice of Badisali Mani. This is the program Tawhid the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in the series, and that, of course, authored by Badisali Mani. And Badisali, I want to say a big shukran for joining us this evening and unpacking this very potent concept. And I think, inshallah, we'll have to go a bit deeper in the next program as well, just to understand once again the response that needs to be had by us as Muslims to these challenges and to these tests. I think also just to make an observation that obviously tests and challenges are not easy, and Allah knows that. Those tests are designed to be difficult. Those tests are designed to challenge us. But what gives comfort to the Muslim is that beyond that test and that challenge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants ease, and also Allah is testing to purify and to advance the believer in his status in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is what seems to encourage people who are in difficulty, and should encourage people who are in difficulty. And we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, make it the path easy for all of us. Ameen, inshallah.
Yeah. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just make it easy for us to understand in every difficulty what is the potential benefit that we should actually extract, or the lesson that we should extract from that experience. And next to that is to accept that Allah is the one who decrees and determines how our lives are going to be tested. Allah is in charge of that. If we accept that Allah is in charge, then we won't express dissatisfaction with the decree of Allah, no matter what it is. Then we will be able to manage those difficult situations even better. But it's not an easy topic. It's easy to say it, but all of us, when we are tested, we respond and react sometimes in very unacceptable manners, Muhammad Fasih.
Bilisari, once again, big shukran, all the best, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Muhammad Fasih, and the listeners out there.
If you would like a copy of the book The Essentials of Tawhid, or the book The Big Bang, The Amazing Human Body, or any of the other books in the series, you're welcome to visit www.salimani.co.za and visit the tab where the books are, and you will be able to download any of the books in PDF format, inshallah. Well, from myself, Muhammad Fasih Peterson, till I speak to you again, inshallah, I bid you wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and have a safe evening further. I'm going to stop this, or maybe I should just let it record. Yeah. So, Bisani, do we have time for another one?
Yes, we can. Let me just say quickly, see. Yeah. Yes.
So, how would Bisani propose we tackle this one?
Normally, when things go well, we become complacent and relaxed and neglectful. That's normal. Imagine how life would have been if there were no tests ever. Would we ever turn to Allah? We'll become more and more and more forgetful the longer we are in a state of comfort. So Allah has designed the world in such a way that tests will follow ease and comfort, and ease and comfort will follow tests. Allah has designed the world like that as a blessing for us, as a favor to us. Because had Allah just kept us in a state of comfort, we would all have gone completely off the rail. So that would be one of the places where we should actually start, I think.
I'm just thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the plagues of Egypt. Allah used the difficulties that came to Egypt as a way to subdue Fir'aun, even as a way to bring him to the recognition of the Creator of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to bring him to Iman. So even difficulties were waged upon Fir'aun as a means to try and get get him to a state of belief, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that he would. So I mean, even the disbeliever is given challenges. Even the kuffar are given challenges along with Muslims. So the difference, I would imagine, with the Muslim is he's already on the path, in a sense, because he believes in Allah. So Allah is refining him and refining him and refining him. But the person who is not Muslim and he finds challenges, it's supposed to drive him towards asking questions and seeking that answer.
Yeah, that divine assistance.
Yeah, that divine assistance. Subhanallah.
And it's a beautiful example that you're using. So it shows that Allah is fair, even to all human beings, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim. Allah puts them through tests. These tests are supposed to, you've tried everything you can, now you can't, now turn to me, but they don't. You know, so that's a very good example.
Inshallah. Okay, we're still running. So what's the time now? Yes, let's put my stopwatch on here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in the series, authored by Budasali Mani, who joins me. Budasali, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the show once again.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Muhammad Fasih and the listeners out there.
It's a pleasure having Budasali with us, and yeah, we continue a discussion from last week where we were looking at tests and challenges and how we need to respond to those tests and to those challenges. Now, Budasali, the question that this begs, that some might ask is, why does Allah need to put mankind through tests? Why does Allah need to have mankind experience these challenges and these difficulties? And obviously, that feeling would be amplified by the experience, the pain. Some people might question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for putting them through difficulties and asking why. So the question is, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put out these difficulties and these challenges? What is the intention of or what is the purpose of these tests in the life of a human being, and particularly a Muslim?
Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, Muhammad Fasih, is done with wisdom, and we must seek to understand these things, even if it's not obvious to us, and even if we never get to the reason, but have in your mind, Allah does it with a good intention, and there's wisdom behind everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. If you take the example of people who are living comfortable lives, let's use an example of a person who is in business. He starts off, he struggles a bit initially, but then the business succeeds. He becomes successful. And as he becomes more successful, he has to spend more time in the business. And the business just keeps on growing and growing and growing and growing. And he's becoming so wealthy, he can't even count. He doesn't even have enough time to count all the money he's got. And he can buy now, he can go on holidays, he can buy a car, he can, if it's a man, he takes 3-4 wives too, on top of that. And he becomes so involved with his affluence that he forgets Allah in the process. Now imagine a life where there was absolutely no test. If Allah created human beings with absolutely no test in it, then the test is in fact, or the wealth is in fact not a blessing. It's something that takes him further and further and further away from Allah. Because human nature is such that if you become comfortable and things are going well, then you don't turn to Allah. There's no need to turn to Allah. You only turn to Allah when you have a difficulty. Now imagine there was no difficulty. It means that generally human beings would just go completely off the rail. And that's one of the good reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's one of the, overriding blessings that we should actually recognize, that the tests are there as reminders that we should actually return to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and put total trust and reliance in Him and not in our good and comfortable lives and our own abilities alone. Muhammad Fasih.
Now, but Asani, coming back to that point, and we've said that the purpose of the test is to refine the believer, in a sense, to be able to purify and raise his status or her status in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, should we say that because this is the intention and the purpose, that whenever a test comes, whenever difficulty comes, that we should remind ourselves that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That would be the gateway to engaging with anything. So you have an argument with your nephew or your niece or your brother, your sister. This is from Allah. Or you come outside on a rainy day and you realize that someone has cut the hard top on your car. You say, the soft top on your car. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As opposed to looking at it from a very dunya or physical point of view, where you just lay the blame where it is coming from physically. Like someone did something to me, so I'm laying the blame there. Should we be approaching it from this perspective?
Muhammad Fasih, the way we approach our difficulties and our tests, as I indicated earlier, is a clear reflection of the state of our hearts. How much iman and taqwa do we truly have? So a person who behaves in a particular way to a test or a difficulty, and you standing outside and you're observing their response, without judging the person, without judging, that person is giving you an indication of what level of iman and taqwa they have by their response to that difficulty. Now, Sayyidina Umar, the second Khalifa in Islam, radiallahu an, when he actually gave us a method of how he responded, which is something that we can copy and paste. We can take it exactly like copy and paste. He said that the first thing, if he was faced with a difficulty, he would recognize or look for or search for the blessings in whatever difficulty he's experiencing. And the first thing that he would do, he would ensure that his iman is unaffected by that difficulty or that hardship. He made sure he looked into his heart, whatever difficulty and experience he's going through, he would check his heart and say, okay, I am on a safe ground here, because I am not going to allow this to weaken my iman and my attitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing he did you want to come in there before I go to the second thing, Muhammad Fasih? The second thing he did was when he was faced with a difficulty. So first he checked his iman, that his iman was unaffected. It was still intact and solid. The second thing that he would do, he would express gratefulness. He would express his gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever it is that happened to him, that it wasn't worse. Because whatever it is that we're going through, just remember it could have been worse. Doesn't matter what you think. Anything. You are never given the worst. There's always something worse that could have happened to you. And that is the second thing that he said, how he approaches a difficulty. He's grateful to Allah for not giving him a test that was worse than the current one. The third thing that he did was he made sure that he never expressed dissatisfaction or unhappiness with what he saw as the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He accepted that whatever he's going through, he acknowledged this is Allah's will for me to be tested like this, and therefore I'm not going to express dissatisfaction or unhappiness or anger. He made sure, he checked himself to make sure that he kept that back. And the fourth thing, of course, he made dua whenever something bad occurred, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward him for this difficulty that he is going through. And those are the four things. And one, if one takes how this beloved Sahaba responded, it gives us almost a complete rundown of how we should actually be approaching it. And one of the ways, of course, is to just test our own responses. Do we do it that way or don't we do it? So firstly, he checked his iman, number one. He made sure his iman wasn't weakened in any way, that it was intact and unaffected. Secondly, he expressed gratitude that it could have been worse, and he was thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, he made sure that no matter how difficult it was, that he didn't express dissatisfaction or anger. And then lastly, what he did, he appealed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit or reward him for those difficulties that he experienced. And that would be such a nice copy and paste example, Muhammad Fasif.
MashaAllah. The voice of Badasari Mani. This is the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book, The Essentials of Tawhid. And tonight, we're continuing our discussion around tests and challenges and how we as human beings need to respond to them. When we come back, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. Badasari, where do we go from here?
Now we come to the sword with which to fight this. We've now got iman and taqwa. Now comes the quality of sabr. How do we've got iman and taqwa, and what else should we be doing to cultivate and develop sabr? Sabr is considered to be half of iman. Why is it considered so important? I think that would be the next area that we should actually go on to, Muhammad Fasif.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in a series authored by Badasari Mani. And tonight we are speaking about tests and challenges. Now, Badasari, the other thing that comes to mind is that when one is afflicted with a challenge or a test is placed in one's path by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the human being always wants things to be over as quickly as possible. The human being wants to get back to normality as soon as possible. And I think also with coronavirus and COVID-19, the same thing is that people are just praying for a vaccine and praying that life can get back to normal. So what role does sabr or patience play in respect to the response to the test? How important is sabr or patience and the exercising thereof in relation to this important lesson that we are being taught directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Muhammad Fasih, sabr has been identified as one of the qualities that's absolutely crucial in the life of a believer. It is something that we should develop and strive to improve on, because it's a quality that has different levels. Um, it's considered as half of Iman. And one of the key reasons why sabr is considered as half of Iman is at the level of understanding sabr, um, in the highest form of sabr is to be completely satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when we say decree satisfied with the decree and acceptance of whatever Allah has put out, it means the way that Allah has designed our specific life with its tests and its difficulties and then its blessings and mixed it up. It is within that situation that we have to demonstrate that we have sabr. Now, sabr is something that if you were to apply it to a difficulty, the attitude of a person who has developed this quality of sabr, of a person who has a low level of iman, how would he demonstrate sabr when he is tested? He responds like the person in the first category that we mentioned. He shows that he's angry and dissatisfied with what has happened. He shows that he is not happy, in fact, with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can see at that level how important the quality of sabr is. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just place us here on the dunya and waited for us to live our lives, and then Allah comes and then determines how we will be tested. Allah designed the specific circumstances in our lives. Allah designed it, carefully designed it. And Allah knows what each person is capable of, because Allah gave you all your qualities and your abilities. So Allah wants to see how are we going to respond. One of the first things is, are you displaying sabr? Are you displaying satisfaction with what I have decreed for you to test you? So that is, it's such a crucial quality that if we say, I want to deal with this issue in a way, and where do I start? Start with examining your level of patience, of sabr that you have in your life, because that will be a nice place to start if you want to extract the full benefit of difficulties, because there's benefit, has blessings in it. But if you want to get the full blessing out of it, then use this tool, this weapon of sabr to actually help you develop this particular quality. Muhammad Fasih.
The voice of Bilisani Mani. This is the program Tawhid in the Creation, exploring the book, The Essentials of Tawhid. Time for us to take another break, and when we come back, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. Bilisani, where do we go from here?
What I've actually done, if we must summarize the blessings and the benefits, then the hardships, what are the blessings and the potential benefits of hardships and difficulties? We said it's supposed to be a blessing for us. What are they? I think the first thing is, and I'm just going to rattle through it, this is actually quite a few. It is intended for us to return to obedience if we've been off the track. Number two, we have the assurance that the test won't go beyond a certain limit. We will be tested within our ability to cope and to bear. And with that comes the assurance that it will after difficulty will come relief. Um, but one of the other things, it develops tawakkul. It removes reliance on anything other than Allah. And it also leads to being satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It helps us to develop iman and taqwa. And what I didn't mention earlier is that every difficulty that we experience, Allah guarantees, and Rasulullah has a hadith on it, that for every difficulty we experience, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove some of your sins as if they didn't exist. Allah will just wipe it out. So difficulty and hardships is one of the ways to actually balance your book, so to speak. And I think that is one of the, well, even as much as a thorn prick. Those would be some of the blessings. I was thinking that maybe we could just run through. If we say there are blessings, what are these blessings?
Okay, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawhid in the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid with Butasani Mani. And tonight we are speaking about trials and tribulations. We're speaking about how we should engage with these lessons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. Now, Butasani, coming back to the trial or the test itself, and obviously what it's designed to do in the individual, there certainly is a lot that can be said about not only the response, but the attitude that we have towards tests and what they are striving to achieve within us.
Yes, Muhammad Fasih. In a sense, it would be useful to just, if we say there are blessings, what are those blessings? What are those blessings that we are talking about? Now, it becomes a long list, and I don't want to repeat everything again that we did cover, but it would be useful just to run through them quickly. The first thing is, if we're going through tests, it's supposed to be a mechanism for us to correct bad behavior or sinful behavior. It should be a reminder. You're going through this test so that you can examine your life to correct whatever wrong you are doing. That's the big blessing in it. Because if that didn't happen, you would just continue be doing all the wrong things. The second thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that after every test, there will be relief. So nothing is going to last forever. And that is a great blessing for us. Then the other thing that we should see as a blessing is the fact that it removes reliance on ourselves and our own abilities and people around us, and we develop true tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we've exhausted all our own methods of solving the problem, and we have failed, and we eventually turn to Allah, and Allah keeps you in that state for longer so that you develop those qualities that you turn to Allah in the first place. Don't turn to yourself or others. First go to Allah before you go to anyone else. Then being satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what Allah has put out, whether it is good or bad, to develop that ability. Tests are supposed to help us develop that ability to accept the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under all circumstances, and as a result of that, we develop strong iman and taqwa. Then I think the other thing out of all of this is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it doesn't matter how small the difficulty is or the hardship is. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if it's as much as a thorn prick, you will be rewarded for that. And how will Allah reward you? Allah will wipe out your sins as if it didn't exist. So imagine comparing a prick of a thorn to a difficulty where you lose a limb, your arm or your leg or an eye, compared to a thorn prick. How much sin will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove? So difficulties is difficulties are immediately compensated with the removal and the erasure of sins that we have committed in our life. So if we take that as just a very broad summary of the blessings, then we can see how generous Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us to have actually designed our lives such that we're actually going to be tested, because all those things that I mentioned now are in fact the benefits of these tests and these hardships. Muhammad Fasih? Um, okay, I can't hear you.
Salam Bisari, my internet just went down there for a moment and I got kicked out. Was Bisari able to complete that segment?
Yes,
Khair, inshallah. Okay.
I was able to complete all the possible benefits that arises in a summarized form, that we should extract from difficulties and hardship.
Also, uh, okay, so I'm gonna do the ad break and then I'll ask Bisari. Then when we come back from the ad break, what can we then for that last segment? What can we focus on? Inshallah.
Let me just see this. I think the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, the greater the trial or the difficulty, the greater the reward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the people he loved the most. He tested them the most severely, um, to deal with that. I would say we touch on that, and how
But
we
Bisari,
behave.
I
Yeah,
got kicked out again. So if Bisari could maybe just repeat that.
I'm saying that the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greater the reward, the greater the trial or the difficulty, the greater the benefit. There's a hadith which I will read out and then just touch on explaining that, um, that we should display patience, um, in every state, adversity or abundance, um, and we should examine our inward and our outward conduct at all times. Always be cognizant whatever's happening. Don't only look at what you are doing, but look at how is it affecting your inside, your heart, and the state of your heart. And we should develop endurance and patience and fortitude, because those are the weapons with which we can fight these difficulties. But we must keep our heart in the right state.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in a series authored by Bidasani Mani. Bidasani, tonight, obviously, with the talk about trials and tribulations and how we respond to them and what they are what is intended to be achieved through these trials and tribulations in the character and in the heart of man. How can one train oneself spiritually? How can one train oneself emotionally to accept these challenges with a positive mindset and to not languish in the negative feelings that come with difficulty? How can one train one's mind to become positive and train one's heart in a sense?
I think, Muhammad Fasih, it's not difficult. I mean, it is very difficult for me to make a statement that will be applicable to every person who's listening out there, because everyone's situation is different. Everyone's state of heart is different. But at the general level is to start off by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator. Allah is most generous, most kind, most compassionate. Allah is fair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not put us through things that will be harmful to us, because Allah doesn't benefit out of that. We must be firm about that understanding. If we firm about the test is supposed to be a benefit for me, if you start there, if you don't have that, you're going to approach the test in a way that is not going to take you forward. It might even take you backwards. You have to start that the tests have been designed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't happen. The car didn't crash into you because the driver was drunk of the other car. Allah designed that situation to test how will my slave respond under these circumstances. Allah designed it. Allah is the creator of this world. Nothing can happen outside the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to lay the foundation of how we're going to approach these difficulties and hardships when they do arrive. Then, of course, depending on how we approach it, and I think we've covered quite a few possible examples of how we have been advised to deal with it. But developing iman and taqwa, we speak about it very easily, but it's something that actually requires for us to look at not only how do we physically respond to things out there, but actually examine the state of our hearts. We are made up of two components, an inner and an outer. We can't only react at the physical level. There is a spiritual response. And the spiritual response means that you have to have the spiritual tools to deal with that. Iman, taqwa, sabr, tawakkul, those things must develop. And in each person's case, it will be different to the next. As long as we don't rely on ourselves and we have total trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand that Allah won't test us beyond what we can bear. And for every difficulty, you're going to be rewarded. We should, in fact, if we're big enough, we should, in fact, ask for Allah to test us more. When you are tested, you should actually ask, Allah, test me more, because I've got so many sins, I need to wipe out some of these sins. instead of saying Allah is unfair and you're dissatisfied. Muhammad Fasih.
The Salimani, this is the program Tawhid Migration, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in the series. And yes, uh, speaking about tests and the challenges that man faces, what should we be achieving through through what should we be, what should be our response in meeting with these challenges? And I think also what comes out of this is that the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is apparent in the sense that the purification of man and the gaining of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate goal of these tests. And if one responds in the correct manner, one only ascends that ladder of spirituality and the ladder of closeness to Allah, which is the ultimate goal and ultimate prize. And I think if we only but understood what it means to achieve closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what it means to become beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we would smile at any challenge that comes our way. SubhanAllah.
Yeah, Muhammad Fasih, you know, it reminds me of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not very long, but I'll read it quickly. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I open quote: "The greater the trial or difficulty, the greater the reward. And when Allah loves a person, He will test them. The people, as long as they are in good health, good shape, good condition, they are contented." And it goes on. You don't know their true character because they are in a good situation. As long as they are in good circumstances, they are contented. But if a trial or difficulty or a hardship comes upon them, then you will see their reality. They will go to their reality. The mu'min will run to his iman, and the hypocrite will run to his hypocrisy. Close quote. It's such a powerful test that we can apply to ourselves. The first part of the hadith says that if Allah is testing you more than Allah is testing somebody else, this hadith says it means that Allah loves you more. Not easy to understand when you feel all this pain and this difficulty and you don't know where to run to, but it means that Allah loves you more if Allah tests you. The prophets and the salihin and the awliya, the people who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, were the most severely tested. So that should, instead of putting us off, Allah is not testing that person like Allah's testing me, and I'm doing more than him, and yet Allah's testing me more. He's going through ease and comfort. Yeah, you doing more than him, and you getting the difficulty. It almost sounds, if you approach it with your mind only, it might sound that it's unfair. And that's where you have to guard against, because this hadith guides us. It says, more difficulty, more tests, more challenges means that Allah loves you more. And we should actually, as we're getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should actually prepare, Muhammad Fasih. As you're getting closer to Allah, we all say we want to get closer to Allah, then prepare for difficulty. Prepare that there's going to be more hardships and more difficulties, more severe. The test will be more severe. It's like a person who's going to write an exam. If you pass your junior certificate, your what do they call it now? Grade 10. If pass grade 10, now you can decide whether you want to do matric. You battled a bit to pass your grade 10, but now you want to because you know you need a matric certificate. Can you expect the same test that you did in grade 10? You must prepare that the test in grade 10 is going to be more difficult than the test or the exam that you did in grade. Uh, uh, if you want to do matric, the grade 12 exam will be more difficult than the grade 10 exam because you are going to get more. You're going to get a matric certificate. The other one is a junior certificate. So, in the same way, if you want to do matric, prepare for a harder test. If you want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, prepare for bigger and greater tests.
So what Bilisad is saying is that the greater the test, the greater the achievement. So if the achievement is greater, the test will meet that achievement by being more difficult. And when we look at that, we want to also say that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests mankind, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests human beings, it's not out of spite. It's
Mm,
not out of hatred for Allah's creation. It's not
mm.
out of a sense of wanting to see mankind languish in difficulty, and Allah takes no satisfaction in suffering of mankind.
Yeah, Allah doesn't benefit out of it. Allah is as great. Allah's state, divine state, is absolutely perfect. Nothing can change about Allah's greatness, perfection. So whatever we do on the dunya, whether we do good or bad in terms of our deeds, whether we sin or whether we stay whole night in ibadah, doesn't affect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness in any way whatsoever. In the same way, whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us in comfort or in hardship doesn't change Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any way. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great, so merciful, so kind, so compassionate, it means if Allah puts us through certain things, there's a benefit in it. Have we got the eyes and the heart to extract that benefit from whatever that difficulty is? And I can guarantee you, even if I don't know, but because I have some idea of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, whatever difficulty you are going through, it doesn't matter what it is, there is a benefit in it for you. There is a benefit in it for you. It is not a punishment, as you say. It's not something that Allah wants you to suffer or feel the pain or whatever uh, for whatever reason. It's designed, all those difficulties and tests are designed to be of benefit to us. We must extract the benefit. We must look for it.
Amin, inshallah. But Sally, I want to say a big shukran for joining me this evening and for uh, talking about an important concept, and one that again we need to refine in our thinking, and we need to get right so that we can benefit from our experiences and gain that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. I mean, but
Inshallah.
Sally, all the best, stay safe, inshallah, and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Muhammad Fasih, and the listeners out there.
And if you'd like a copy of the book The Essentials of Tawhid or any other books in the series, you're welcome to visit www.salimani.co.za and navigate to the books tab and download any of the books in PDF format. Well, from myself, Muhammad Fasih Peterson, till I speak to you again, inshallah, I bid you assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and have a safe evening further. Yeah,